Good evening, everybody. My name is Neha Dewan, and I'm the National Director for South Asians for Biden, the host of today's event, along with the Indian American Impact Fund and Indians for Biden National Council. South Asians for Biden is a national grassroots organization that is dedicated to engaging, educating, and mobilizing the South Asian community. We're currently in 19 chapters and 21 regions, and there truly is something for everybody to do as part of South Asians for Biden. We're actually going to be turning over some of our work with respect to GOTV, and we'll certainly have information for you later on in the panel with regards to how you can be involved. I would like to actually take a moment to thank a few members of our team. Harini Krishnan, who is the state director for California, and Azra Beg, who are part of our New Jersey team, and also Deepa Sharma as part of our traditional media team, Shivam Patel, and the entire social media team. Today's event, featuring 4 amazing South Asian women leaders who are trailblazers in their community, is truly of incredible importance in light of the historic selection of the first Black and South Asian woman of Indian heritage, Senator Kamala Harris, as our Democratic vice presidential nominee. Growing up in the US as a South Asian woman, there weren't many women, let alone women of color in public service or leadership roles whom I could identify with or even look up to. This is why serving as a national co-chair for South Asians for Hillary back in 2016 to help elect the first female presidential nominee was deeply impactful and significant for me. It was truly the first time that there could be a woman who could be president. 4 years later, to be able to help elect Vice President Biden, a presidential candidate who has kept his commitment to championing diversity and inclusion in his selection of Senator Harris as our next vice president is truly inspiring and particularly meaningful. 4 years after Secretary Clinton's devastating loss, I now have a daughter who, unlike me, will have many women, especially South Asian women in public service and leadership roles that she can look up to. We have 5 of them here speaking on our panel tonight. To be able to tell her that she can be a mayor, a city council member, a state senator, and a state auditor general is so significant that she has footsteps that she can follow in. And these women have essentially paved the way for her, something which I didn't have when I was growing up. And this gives me so much joy and hope for our community. And for that, I thank our speakers for tonight's event, as they truly have set the stage for so many others to follow, including my daughter, Mila. However, to be able to tell my daughter that she can be the vice president and possibly the president someday of this country, and actually show her someone who looks like her on the national stage is so significant and empowering. It's also a proud moment, a feeling that I know is shared by countless women like me around this nation. It is therefore my great honor to share with you a special message from a leader who has broken many glass ceilings and inspired many young women and women of color to follow in her exact footsteps. Our Democratic vice presidential nominee, Senator Kamala Devi Harris.
Hi, South Asians for Biden. It's Kamala, and I'm so excited that we are having this panel today with so many incredible, trailblazing women who are ready to usher in a new wave of leadership into the White House. As you know, my mother, Shamala Harris, came from India at age 19 to pursue her dream of curing cancer. She dedicated her life to fighting for the promise of America, just like Joe Biden has. Joe has been proud to stand with the Asian American and Pacific Islander community and is committed to making sure that the Biden-Harris administration reflects the diversity of America. As Joe Biden has said, we are stronger because of our diversity, not in spite of it. And to all the young women watching this, I just want you to know that leadership starts the day you are born. You are never too young or too old to be a leader. So get involved in your community, run for office. Whatever you do, it matters. Just lead. And don't listen that it can't be done, because I never have. Okay, to everyone, thank you. Stay safe and take care.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harini Krishnan, and I'm one of the California State Directors for South Asians for Biden. Senator Kamala Harris's words tonight are especially meaningful to me. As someone who had the honor of serving as a lead volunteer organizer in California for her campaign in 2019, as the mother of two strong daughters who see themselves in her, and as an Indian American daughter of another mother who came from Tamil Nadu to the US in search of a better life for her children, like her mother, Shyamala Gopalan. Her nomination as vice president signals a new era of diversity in our nation's history, one that celebrates and lifts women and women of color to all places where decisions are made. It is now my great honor to introduce to you the moderator for today's panel of speakers, Mini Timmaraju. Mini Timmaraju has over 20 years of professional experience leading federal, state, and local campaigns, as well as advocacy efforts for nonprofit organizations. She has an extensive background on gender issues and community outreach strategies. She currently serves as an executive director on the diversity and inclusion team for Comcast NBC Universal. Prior to joining Comcast, Mini served as Hillary for America's National Women's Vote Director, leading the historic campaign's planning and implementation of its strategy to maximize women's participation in the election. Mini's professional experience includes serving as the national director of the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans and in various leadership roles with Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Mini received her bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley and completed her JD at the University of Houston Law Center. She currently serves on the board of Emily's List, supporting pro-choice Democratic women candidates, and the Indian American Impact Fund. It is my absolute honor to introduce you to today's moderator, Mini Timmaraju.
Thank you so much for that really beautiful and kind introduction, Harini. And I want to give a great thanks and shout out to the entire South Asians for Biden team. I've been really proud to see your incredible work, and what a historic time we're in now as a community to celebrate and to finish this campaign off, right? So thanks to Harini, Neha, Ananya, Azra, Deepa, Shivam. I'm sure I'm missing folks, but thank you, thank you, thank you. And I love that the South Asians for Biden team is run by all these strong, amazing South Asian American women. So thanks again. I'm going to launch right in to the introductions of our badass panel of women. I think you're going to be as wowed by them as I am, and I can't wait to introduce them. So first off is Dr. Sadaf Jaffer. Mayor Jaffer, I love saying this, Mayor Jaffer is the mayor of Montgomery Township, New Jersey. She is the first South Asian American woman to serve as the mayor of a municipality in New Jersey. Kind of mind-blowing, all things considered, about New Jersey. And the first Muslim woman to serve as the mayor of a municipality in the United States. Wow. And she is a postdoctoral research associate in South Asian Studies at Princeton University, where she teaches courses on South Asian, Islamic, and Asian American studies. So that's just a tiny bit about her. You're going to get to know her better in the next hour. So thank you so much for joining us, Mayor Jaffer. And our next guest is an old friend, a fellow Philadelphian, Dr. Nina Ahmad. Nina is a groundbreaking Democratic nominee for the Office of Auditor General in Pennsylvania, being the first person of color, a scientist, and an immigrant to be candidate for statewide executive office in such a critical state this year, Pennsylvania. And she has also been a business owner, and she previously served as the deputy mayor of Philadelphia, the president of the Philadelphia chapter of the National Organization of Women, and on President Obama's Asian American and Pacific Islander National Advisory Commission. So thank you so much, Nina. Can't wait to hear more from you. Next, I want to introduce you to Kesha Ram. I'm sure you've already heard of Kesha, but I need to tell you a little bit more about her. She recently won the primary election to serve as Chittenden County in Vermont State Senate at the age of 34. With her likely election in November, she's poised to become the first woman of color and the youngest woman in history to serve in the Vermont Senate. Prior to that, she served 4 terms in the Vermont House of Representatives on behalf of Burlington, where she was elected the youngest legislator in the country at that time. Incredible. I know you're going to really love hearing more from Kesha. And finally, last but not least, Harbir Bhatia is a trusted leader, a South Asian Sikh immigrant female with 25 years in technology, innovation, and community organizing. She doesn't see herself with one identity, but many. Currently, she's a candidate for Santa Clara City Council in Santa Clara, California. She serves on multiple local and national boards on community building, diversity and inclusion, economic development, women's rights, and many others. She's received multiple awards and is known for her COVID relief initiatives stemming from the belief of Sarbat da Pala, creating betterment for all, a principle of Sikhi. I hope I got that right. She's going to tell me if I didn't. Can't wait for you all to be part of this conversation with us. So with that, I hope we've got all your cameras on and all your mics on. I'm going to jump into the first question for the panel, and this is for the whole team. We have this historic moment. I know that we've really talked about this a lot and celebrated the fact that Senator Harris made history last week by becoming the first Black woman and the first South Asian American woman of Indian heritage to accept the Democratic Party's vice president nomination. Her selection speaks volumes of VP Joe Biden's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and not only choosing a woman, but a woman of color as his running mate in a really critical time in American history for race and race relations. I want to pick a personal editorial note about the death of Jacob Blake last week, and the death last night of Chadwick Boseman, a Howard U grad and a close friend of Senator Harris. We're really in a moment where communities of color are really grieving the moment that we're in this country, but we can also celebrate and be optimistic about the hope that this Harris-Biden ticket gives us. So with that introduction, what role do you think women of color and specifically South Asian American women can play in a Biden-Harris administration? So I'm going to ask Mayor Jaffer to just start us off.
Well, I think the sky's absolutely the limit. I mean, we have a candidate on the actual ticket who is from our community, who shares so many of the similarities to our stories, and that has shattered, all the glass ceilings. So I really am optimistic about the inclusion that we're going to see in this administration once it gets into power. And I think it's going to reflect a lot of the positive things that we saw under the Obama administration, where there was really an effort to include Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And there really was, we know all of the prominent South Asian Americans who had positions in that administration. So I think we're only going to see that grow and improve. And hopefully that will see a lot more women from our community, especially because in recent years, more of us have been in different types of positions of power and authority in elected office at the state level, at the municipal level. So I think that, this is really a very hopeful moment. And I certainly also asked my daughter that day if she wanted to be president someday, because it seems so much more possible now. It's not just, something that's very distant. So as I said, I think the sky's the limit.
I love it. Sky's the limit, and optimism for our daughters and our nieces and future generations of South Asian women. Thank you, Mayor. Can I go to Dr. Nina Ahmad next?
Thank you so much. First, I wanted to say thank you to the unsung sheroes and heroes who are making this happen today. It takes a lot of people to put something on like this to, even if it's a virtual event. They've been tweeting, they've been, changing their graphics. It has been an amazing effort, and it's really included a lot of people. And that is really symptomatic of the Biden-Harris ticket is inclusion. And I think we have, all of us on this call, all of us on this panel know what it means to be left out and marginalized, particularly myself, having lived through a war of independence as a child. And so I'm keenly aware how much effort it takes to get your voice heard. And for Senator Harris to be where she is an amazing feat, and it has been a long time coming. We don't stand just here by ourselves. Everybody's work here today and before allows us to be here today. Just like I said, I lived in a war. I stand in the sacrifice of people who died. I stand in the sacrifice of people here who died for all of us to be, as an immigrant, to be able to even come here. Without the civil rights movement, I wouldn't be here. So I say all of this to say that it's significant when she's going to be in office, because she will reflect us and we will reflect her. And having worked with the Obama-Biden team on that commission you mentioned, they've already shown they have a track record of inclusion. We had on that commission Karen Ahuja, who is this amazing South Asian woman who ran the commission. We were all commissioners on it, and we did amazing work. You know, they really allowed us to use that platform to do so much, including, you know, I worked on labor issues involving nail salon workers. So I'm very hopeful. This ticket gets into office. I think we're going to see a different America, an America that reflects all of us, and I'm really excited and hopeful about that.
I want to just say personally, when you were on the commission, I was working at Incapa. We had a really great relationship. So we also know in a Biden-Harris administration, inclusion will extend to community groups and leaders, not just elected officials or appointed officials. So it was, frankly, the most inclusive administration we've seen. And we know that Joe Biden gets that. And we know that Kamala Harris gets it. So thanks for that great reminder, Nina. And thanks for talking about your immigrant background and your history, too. I think it's so important. I want to ask Kesha, I think you might be our youngest panelist, but I'm not sure. But that's a great thing to address the same question. Talk about what you see in the future of a Biden-Harris administration for our community.
I've always been told one day I won't be the youngest anymore, and I totally wait for that day and welcome it. We need younger voices. But thank you. And, you know, I've just been privileged with having Senator Kamala Harris in my life for a long time as a native of California. You know, I grew up in my Indian immigrant father and Jewish American mother's Irish pub in Los Angeles. So having someone with her story just paved the way for me entirely. And I want to say, to really answer your question, who's on my mind is my Dottie G, my grandmother, you know, who saw me become a legislator at the age of 22 and still sort of wished I was a doctor or an engineer or even a musician, honestly, at the time. And I just think the skepticism of South Asian women is so valuable. Like, what is it about, what are we as South Asian women, we never have been faced with a problem we didn't want to solve or a person we didn't want to help, because we've been ingrained that if you're going to do something and have a title, you better use it for the good of everyone. And so I think I carry her spirit with me, you know, that it's not enough to hold a position of authority. You have to exercise true leadership. And I think that's what we bring to the table and what Vice President Kamala Harris will bring to the table.
I love that. And I love it. I don't think we talk enough, or maybe I haven't been around you enough to talk about the Irish pub that your Jewish mother and your Indian father ran. But I feel like there's a whole book there if you haven't written it, or a whole Zoom just about that we need to do, Kesha. So put that in the list. Harbir, I know you're really running a great race in a critical time in a place that's generally known to be progressive, but we've seen a lot of challenges. So what are your thoughts from California is this amazing story, but also tons of work to be done. So would love to hear your perspective on this and how it relates to your vision for a Biden-Harris administration.
You know, I think if I was to say, the truth of the matter is that many of us did not take these steps sooner. First, because we come from a culture where people really remember why they left India. I remember getting on the plane, I think it was 7.5 years old. And I still remember that my parents left so much behind. They left security, they left a sense of stability, friends, family that they knew. But what for? Because they felt coming here was going to give us that opportunity to be able to seek our future, our dreams, and see the families be prosperous, be, free to practice whatever religion fairly and with support and independence from the government, to allow us to really be part of a society that could, give you the freedom to chase your dreams and your ideals. But that now has changed, where we need to go one step further. Right? As a Sikh woman, I think for me, Sarbata Pala has always been part of my grassroots life, which is that you constantly fight for the rights of others. You think of equality, equity, and justice, but we still hadn't seen a lot of people in those positions of leadership that kind of made me feel like, oh, I'm supposed to be one of those people. And in my mind, I never saw myself as those people, because I always felt the South Asians, and actually probably a lot of minorities that are first or second generation, we're not supposed to create waves. We're not supposed to kind of push people to accept us. We're just supposed to be on the sidelines like, hey, let's chase that dream and look for security. But that's where the problem lies, right? And we need to speak up and be more relevant and be more prevalent. And I think this is an opportunity and a time where it's not just only our responsibility, but the doors are open to do so. We need to ensure the mothers, the fathers take the steps to encourage their children to be more civically engaged, to be themselves part of the voting process, right? To know that you have the right to shape your future. And that doesn't mean being on the sidelines. It's time to be more actively engaged. And for me, this is just like, I'm just so happy that, like I said, and you said it in my intro, that, I don't see myself as one identity. I come from multiple perspectives, the South Asian perspective, their independence movement, the Sikh heritage fighting for justice and freedom, the American Civil Rights Act, the whole movement. What is that commonality of it? That we must step up and be ready to serve all. And that's where I think we have that opportunity with the background that we come to say, hey, it's time to be a bit more active. And I want to share this story, just as somebody else mentioned about their children and their nieces. My nieces and nephews were with my grandmother, or their grandmother, my mother, when Trump was being elected. And this isn't a Trump issue, but this is something I want to shed a light on. They said to my mom, Nani, where are we supposed to go if Trump gets elected? My mom said, what do you mean? Well, they said, well, we're brown. She said, that's okay. This is still your country. But they said, no, but he doesn't like brown people. I'm not making commitments. I'm just telling you what they said. And my mom says, no, this is okay you'll be safe here. But they said, can we vote? She said, no, you can't vote yet. You're not 18. They said, can you vote for me? She said, no, because you have to be 18 and it's one person per vote. But at the end of that, they were stumped. When my mom said, that's what you have to wait for. My niece said something at that point. Nani, can I be president? My mom said, why would you want to be president? She said, because then I can be the president for everyone. And I think that message is so powerful that we must remember what it is that it meant to come to America and what it was about that Declaration of Independence that we have to actively support, because we can empathize with all members of society. And it was that we hold these truths self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. I say women, even though the word women is not in there, that they are endowed by their creator certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We must remember we can empathize, we can be the binding factor for all of society and bring us back to those true words and help us get back on track versus being on the sidelines, because we have plenty of reasons that, encourage us and support us and motivates us to be that driving force.
I love that. You had so many gems there, and I love that story. And I think one of the most inspiring things about President Obama is the number of friends of mine who have kids who were born during his administration are now like, they only knew a Black president, and they had unlimited potential of what they could do, right? And now we're going to have a generation of young women who are going to see a woman of color vice president, and they're going to feel like the sky's the limit, I think, to go back to what Mayor Jaffer said. So I love that so much. And it's a great segue to talk about your races and the down ballot races and your journey. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit and ask you all to tell me and tell our audience a little bit more about how you, as South Asian American women leaders who've broken glass ceilings at different levels of government, you're each trailblazers in your communities. Can you talk to us and the audience a little bit about challenges you faced in your political journeys as women and women of color, and more specifically as South Asian American women, and in some cases, multiracial, multi-identity women? And how do you think a Biden administration is going to help address some of those challenges? So I'm going to start actually with Kesha.
Thank you, Minnie. Where do I begin in Vermont? So, Vermont is an incredible state. We punch above our weight. We have Howard Dean, Bernie Sanders. We are a small state, which I think means that you can really engage one-on-one with a lot of constituents. You can see your US Senator or your governor in the grocery store or in the airport and really connect. And we are proud of that. I can't imagine serving in any other state. We are the last state to have never sent a woman to Washington. We have only had one female governor in history, and we look over at New Hampshire, frankly, and we like to, be really proud of our record vis-a-vis New Hampshire. But they have they've had triple crowns many years in a row, women in the U.S. Senate, Congress, and in the governor's seat. And so, and then when you layer on top of it, being a woman of color, being the first woman of color to serve in the state Senate in the 100 years that women have had the right to vote, and we know particularly white women have had the right to vote, There are significant barriers. There's also a lot of opportunities. This year, particularly in our state, every woman who ran for state senate, when you looked at who won in every county, women were at the top of the list. So, myself and the other woman in our county, which is a quarter of the Democratic vote in the state, were at the top of the ticket for who placed for the Senate race. So, people, I think, have started to realize that, when men, and particularly white men, have had a long time in these roles. And they're starting to say, what do you have to offer? And we know we've had a lot to offer. That's the challenge. We know we've been there. We've done the work. We've introduced the bills. We've passed the bills. And now people think we're like an overnight success, and they look at Congress, and I love AOC. I love the energy she's brought, and having come straight from, the bar scene to Congress. It's amazing. But you look at, Ilan, Rashida, Stacey Abrams, Ayanna Pressley, they all served in local office first. They all cut their teeth where it was hard, and you had to, work with a number of colleagues to get anything done, and you didn't always get the glory. And, you have to do that work. You have to do the hard work to get there. The other thing I want to say is that people look at who makes it to Congress and they think, wow, they had a lot of money, or they just worked really hard. They were no overnight success. Less than 5% of elected officials in the country are under the age of 35. But people in Congress, over half of them started in politics under the age of 35. So you do have to look at getting in the game young, chipping away, building a base, building a network. And you have to do that across the board. When I ran for statewide office and lost in 2016, which Indians should get used to taking risks and losing, someone pulled me aside and said, when Bernie Sanders was your age, he got 2%. You got 17%. So, we have to remember it's okay to risk and it's okay to lose, because in the end, it all matters, and it gives a lot more young women and young women of color people to look up to.
And that's not a very immigrant, first generation, South Asian American, attitude. Like, it's okay to lose. I don't know how many of us grow up hearing it's okay to lose. So it's really, I think, impactful and important for you to say it to all of the wonderful people listening to this panel today, especially in electoral politics, and even in policy fights and legislative fights. You got to try many, 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 many times to build the base and soften the ground for these races and for these initiatives. So thank you so much, Kesha. That was really helpful. And I think that was really insightful. And frankly, we don't really think about our community when we think about Vermont. So
I'm here.
I love it. I love it. So I see Harbir. Do you want to go next? I feel like you've got a great. I thought you were away. But I'm going to call on you. Talk about so what challenges have you faced in your political journey, and where do you think the Biden-Harris administration will help with some of those challenges?
I think it's a great question. So firstly, I think, Kesha, I just want to let you know we see you. We're going to be out there to support you, so don't worry. But in terms of my election, it's an interesting, let me give you a little bit of background about Santa Clara. So Santa Clara has been a predominantly establishment council, okay? And I say that because, without sounding like I'm trying to be at all discriminatory to the white bloc, the truth is that our city is a majority minority city, in which 66% of the population is actually a minority. And of that, in my district, majority of these, the largest minority group is actually South Asians. And that's more of a recent situation. That is because more of them now have suddenly been able to vote, because most of them are like tech, being Santa Clara is very tech focused and Silicon Valley is. They have actually been kind of in the background, sometimes coming to council meetings to voice their concerns, but only now, I would say 2020 is the first time we actually have a significant South Asian population to vote. But guess what? Most of them thus far have been very passive about it. Why do we think that is? That is kind of the nature of how I think many, as I said before in my previous answer, have been on the sidelines thinking, hey, I don't want to create too much problem. I don't want to kind of push my opinions too hard because I'm trying to look for security and stability. But the reality is we must inspire them and help them understand the power of their vote to shape the future of this valley and to shape the future of this particular city. And with that, I have found that I'm actually having to make an extra effort to convince my South Asian residents, you have the power. Do not fear that you're upsetting the majority as it is today. And many of them, and I'll give you examples, have actually changed their signs out of fear that they do not want to upset the current majority. And I remind them, look, we just celebrated Independence Day. That should remind you of something for the South Asians that have recently migrated. That was the proof of the pudding of when you stand up and voice against the sense of oppression or being prevented to participate, you must actually actively participate. So my largest portion of my committee is actually youth members, and majority of them are South Asian women and girls and other unique or other women. About 12 of them, I think, are 12 are youth volunteers. Of them, I think 9 or actually 8 are women, and 7 are South Asian women, all in the age between 14 and 16, right? So for me, my goal is, part of my platform is that I want to create a pipeline of future leaders, because I believe as a minority member, I can really empathize with other minority communities and can be a really great solution for the city to think about how do we create a city that serves the lowest of in terms of income, and in terms of those that are probably quite successful, don't think about certain things, the LGBTQ community, our African American community, our minorities of all color, and we have such a large population, they're not getting heard. When I think about me as a South Asian, I think, wait a second, it's not just me as a South Asian that's not having my voice heard. The majority of our minorities aren't having their voice heard. And being now districts, we were forced to go into a district model to prevent the majority from continuing to be elected. We must stand up and be elected, because if we don't, we're going to go back to this older model. So I really come back and say it's really important for us to be engaged. And I believe the Biden-Kamala Harris ticket, the beauty of that ticket is that is what the future looks like. It's not just one identity, it's multiple identities, whether it's technology, whether it's your ethnic race, whether it's your religion. I come from a Sikh background. I'm a technologist. I'm a woman. I'm an Indian. I'm a South Asian. I'm an American. Talk about ways to relate to people. So I would inspire and hope that others are inspired to remember we can connect with society in a larger way, but we must actively participate to shape that future.
I love that, and I think it's what you're talking about is the great reminder of why down ballot state and local races are so critical to representation for these communities. Santa Clara is absolutely, it's ground central for like the tech innovation industry, but also for the growing disparities between the haves and have-nots, driven by, the success of Silicon Valley. And a lot of people misunderstand our community's role in that, right? You see the CEOs and you think that's where most South Asians are. But I have family who've been here unlimited visas and had, issues in this country, and have only recently been able to get citizenship and are really, struggling. And I think what you're talking about, that apathy almost that some of or maybe cynicism our community has, could really shift if they can see a VP Harris in the future, right? Somebody who whose mother came from our homeland. I think it could really shift some of the thinking about what's possible, but it can also do a great job of explaining what you just explained, which is the power of multiracial coalitions. And my next question is going to be about that. So let's hang on to that point, because I think it's so critical. So, Mayor, I'm going to ask you next to talk about your path and where you think your challenges were and how that relates to a future administration.
Absolutely. So our town is one that's had very shifting demographics, especially from the 90s, where it shifted from more of a rural community to more of a suburban community. Our population grew dramatically, and now about 30% of the residents in Montgomery Township are Asian American, and about 20%, I would say, are South Asian American. Yet I was the first South Asian to be on the township committee. And people ask me, why is it that, considering we have such a large Asian American population, we don't see them in public office? And I said, if you go to a space and you don't see anyone who looks like you there, you might feel like you're not welcome. It's not for you. And that's certainly how I did, the sense I got when I started going to those township committee meetings. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I decided to run, and definitely my identities as a South Asian, as a Muslim woman, did play into my experiences. My opponents in 2017 published a flyer that called me dangerous and extreme. And that was not a good feeling, knowing that many people in my community received those types of flyers about me. Thankfully, it didn't work. And I did win my seat, becoming the first and only Democrat as well in 8 years on that committee. And then actually we've been able to flip our entire local government from all Republican to all Democrat in 3 years. So I became mayor in 2018, I became on the township committee in 2018, mayor in 2019, and then I'm mayor this year as well. When I won that election in 2017, when my opponents posted their concession note on Facebook, the first comment on it was, I was born in this country and some Indian's going to tell me what to do. So that was kind of my welcome to this new role. And within the first few months on township committee, there was an anti-Muslim bias crime where someone left pork on a Muslim family's car. And in trying to think about how to respond to that, I decided to start a group called Montgomery Mosaic that is affiliated with the National Not in Our Town movement, that addresses all sorts of issues of prejudice and community building. So we've talked about anti-Black racism, about anti-Latinx violence, about Islamophobia. We've shown, film screenings about the attack on the Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Creek. So we've also had celebratory events like intercultural holiday parties and interfaith. We had an interfaith iftar last year. So that has been a really important part of the work that I've done. And it's, I think, really paid dividends considering all the demands for social justice this year that we're seeing. We've had an event, Montgomery Speaks Out Against Racism, that we organized through Montgomery Mosaic. We had a huge Black Lives Matter rally in town that had over 700 people at it. And then, with participation from community members, I've been organizing sessions with our police department and members of the Black community to talk about how is it that we can create more of a sense of security and connectedness and transparency. So, my history, my sense of identity and belonging is definitely within everything that I do. But I see how it's going to be different for the next generation, because I've seen a lot of the young kids who are especially of South Asian backgrounds wanting to get more involved, wanting to participate more. And I'll share a funny story from my daughter. I was talking about some man who was running to be mayor somewhere, and she started laughing and she said, "A boy mayor? That's silly." And to her, that was the most odd thing in the world, because her whole conscious life, the past few years, I've been the one who's been mayor. So it just goes to show you again what we're saying, that seeing those images, seeing those people in positions of power makes it normal. And for the older generations, it might be kind of hard for them to get used to seeing someone like us in those positions, someone like Kamala Harris. But that's the hope for the future, that people have to get used to it. So I'm very, very enthusiastic about this moment and what the future is going to bring.
Mayor, what I love about what you talked about just now is you transitioned from your experience as a Muslim candidate and a South Asian American candidate to how you were actually able to really use those experiences in your life to really coalition build and to be an advocate for other communities of color because of your lived experience. And I think one of the things I'm excited about for a Biden-Harris administration is that Kamala Harris is multiracial, Black and Asian American, and she's going to bring a perspective that allows, just like your example as an elected official has allowed you to be empathetic and aware and to build relationships beyond your communities, because that's what you do naturally. That's what we do as community leaders who have to kind of code switch and identify and work around other communities. So thank you for all the great work you're doing in New Jersey. It's inspirational. And I think it's the kind of inspiration we're going to hope to see from a Vice President Harris. So really wonderful work. And then Nina, I know you've had some of these similar experiences, and I know personally from working with you in 2016 in Pennsylvania, how much coalition building and how much work you did in the feminist space around anti-racism as well. So I just love to talk a little bit more about your journey and what you see coming in this future.
Absolutely. We, as Audre Lorde says, we don't live single issue lives because we're not single issue people. And that is the basis of coalition building, bringing all those facets of who we are to the table. And I couldn't be where I am today. The first Democratic nominee for a statewide executive office for Auditor General, but for that coalition, and particularly Black women. You know, this is why I'm here. I live in a city, Philadelphia, which has the largest number of votes in all of the state, and I won 72% of that vote. And in the city, we have 45% are African American, and total of 60 are people of color. Right. So I could not do anything because the state is 80% white. So to have, for the first time, someone who is breaking that barrier, I stand on the shoulders and with the help of many communities. And, you know, I'm Bangladeshi American, so I'm a minority within the minority. The Asian American community, first of all, as an immigrant, people come to this country, they don't identify with the term Asian American. They're like, I'm from here, I'm from there. So, building solidarity around that term has been something that has been work. And I think serving on that commission, having those kinds of commissions has been really important. You know, my daughter, younger daughter, who is my social media guru, is watching me right now. She's been texting me as well. And she has told me that, Mom, you know, talk about the fact that you pivoted from being a scientist to a politician and a public servant. That in itself is a diverse path. So all of this put together, you know, you sort of label yourself as someone who is willing to take chances, willing to do something different, and willing to stand up and talk about communities that are not your own. You know, I think we just owe such a huge debt to the African American community. And the fact that Kamala Harris is both African American and Asian is just a great juxtaposition for our communities to come together to talk about, you know, the internal biases we all might have. How do we break those down? And we have someone in the White House who gets that. We have someone in the White House, hopefully we're going to get her there. And we have a state of Pennsylvania that is going to look different because I'm the only statewide candidate of color running on the Democratic side. And if I'm successful, it's going to be sort of a mirror of saying, they're doing these issues over there. How do we translate them here? My job is going to be a fiscal watchdog to make sure tax dollars are used with integrity. What does that mean? That means I'm most interested in the equitable distribution of those dollars. Are we having language access issues addressed? Is our Human Relations Commission looking at the hate crimes that come up? How are we using those dollars that are given to them to use, right? There's so many ways our communities as immigrants and as South Asians and Asians as general contribute to our economy. How do we make sure we acknowledge that so that there's some power in that position to use that to really see and serve everyone? You know, as we mentioned, that there's such a diversity, economic diversity in our communities. We get this model minority myth slapped on us. That doesn't work for everyone. You know, particularly the community I come from doesn't work. You know, the Hmong community, the Cambodian community, we are all sort of refugees coming from war-torn places. So we have a very different existence and experience, and we need to be able to talk about that and how we disaggregate data. That was my favorite term when I served on the commission, is how do we disaggregate data so we have public policy that sees and serves everyone. My hashtag is leave no one behind. And I want to really put that into action as the Auditor General, looking at what our budget priorities are.
So I just want to emphasize that Pennsylvanians, you could have an Auditor General who quotes Audre Lorde, okay? I mean, come on, make that happen. What? I mean, and you know, my favorite nerdy thing about the White House Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders under Barack Obama is the disaggregated data push. And you guys did it. And that disaggregated data is so critical to anti-racism work, because we know to be truly anti-racist, you have to be looking at policies, and you have to make sure they are reflective of all our communities and they're not perpetuating racism, right? But you don't know that. You can't do that without the data. And there's so much misinformation about Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians, how diverse we are, how many different communities we represent. So Nina, always grateful to you for your perspective, your leadership, and your work. And everyone who's going to be phone banking into Pennsylvania, you'll be supporting Nina. So let's make it happen. We got to swing Pennsylvania for Biden-Harris, and we got to get it done for Nina too. So with that, I want to transition to, I wanted to talk a little bit more about anti-Blackness in our communities, but I know we're running out of time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a little radical here, and I'm going to say, answer each of these, either or of these questions, panelists, and I will take them as we go. One question is about anti-Blackness in our community and what we can be doing better to connect with Black Lives Matter and our communities, whether, and a lot of you have already talked about this, so coalition building, etc. But also, we're getting a lot of questions about COVID-19 and how that's affecting you on the campaign trail, but also public policy when you work with school districts and teachers. Some of you are parents. So you could actually talk about both COVID-19 and racism. So I'm going to ask each of you to just jump in and answer which part of the question you prefer to answer. And if you don't jump in, I'm going to call on you. Nina, I'm going to call on you. I just heard you first.
Okay. So just rephrase the question for me again.
So I'm going to give you a choice. You can talk about COVID-19 and its impact on the campaign trail and your policy work, anti-racism, or a combination of both.
Okay, COVID-19 with anti-racism, I'll build that in because, I'm a biomedical scientist by training. So this is of great interest to me. One of the things I've been saying on the campaign trail, I will be designing the first pandemic preparedness audit. So we're proactive, not after the fact. Audits are usually after the fact, but in this case, we can actually get our systems in place. We had a federal government that failed us. And so when we look at this pandemic, the fact that we're forced to do our campaigning not in person, but on Zoom and phone calls and emails, and yet we are persevering. So kudos to all of us on this call who are campaigning and persisting, because particularly as women and women of color, persistence, resistance, these are in our DNA. We just have to do it. We have to do that in our own communities. We have to do that on the campaign trail. But talking about COVID, as many might know, the pandemic stats show that Black and brown people, particularly African Americans, are the least get the least treatment, have the highest rate of infection, are the most impacted by COVID. We had in Philadelphia, we have a doctor, Alice Stanford. She's a Black woman. She's actually a pediatric surgeon. She decided enough was enough. She just got a band of people together and she started going to church parking lots and doing free COVID testing. We were able to convince the city that she needs to get money to actually do this. But they were overlooking that, right? Because it did not seem part of what is normally done. So we have to think outside the box now that we are going to be impacted by COVID for years to come. Our education, our broadband, lack of high-speed broadband was just brought up because in rural counties in Pennsylvania, kids are not being able to get on. In local urban counties where they have high speed, they don't have access. So lots of issues that impact communities of color, people who are disadvantaged economically are coming out with this COVID issue. And we need to take all of those and translate them into better public policy because now we have data to say, how do we treat what we treat? When you talk about maternal mortality, which is, kind of connected because that's what Kamala Harris did a great bill on. It's just racism. Black women are dying 3 times more than white women because physicians and the infrastructure don't listen to them. And this doesn't matter. It's not socioeconomic. It's not education. It's not.
No, it's bias.
It's just bias. So, that bias operates in other places for other communities as well. So when I would look at data around a hospital that is getting money, I would say, let's see your maternal mortality rate. And that's how we get the data to change public policy. And I want to use all of these experiences that we're getting during COVID to actually reimagine what governance could look like and how these institutions break down their racist barriers and their infrastructure and put it right into action.
You're so good, Nina, and you're really distilling the critical moment we're in and how much COVID has exposed these racial fault lines and these biases that have been built into these systems that have always been there, but COVID is just amplifying them, right? And as public policy leaders and officials, you'll have a chance to really shape it. So thank you for addressing my kind of crazy mixed up question. I also want to hear from one of you about how COVID has affected your campaign strategy and your work on your campaign trail, what you're doing. How are you getting your message out? Kesha, Lord, I'm sorry.
It happened to Barack for a long time.
Kesha,
Cool.
tell me. I would love to know more about how you're campaigning during COVID.
Well, a lot of people love my lawn signs because they think of the, rock star Kesha. So that always helps me. But just to build too on this question about hopelessness, how do I get people out to vote who don't care? To tie into what Dr. Ahmad said, which I was just so riveted by, there are so many people who want to participate, want to vote, want to get involved. They're overwhelmed. They're stressed out. We had the highest voter turnout in our history in a non-presidential primary election. It was 39% higher than any time in contemporary history. And even then we had 7,000 spoiled ballots, which is a lot in a small state. So we had at least like 8 to 10% of our ballots were spoiled because people are just trying to figure out, how do I vote? So, to the person in Texas who's feeling hopeless, there are going to be thousands of people who want to vote, who are going to wonder, which address did this go to? How do I make sure I fill this out properly? I would focus your energy there. I think that's what we all need to do, whether we're in Vermont or Texas or anywhere in the country, is remember that there are people despairing who want hope. They need more information. They need someone to reach out to them. And when I've talked to people who say, what can I do? I don't have a lot of money. I just say, all of our worlds are smaller. Think of all the people who trust you and email them and tell them that you support me. And, for a newcomer candidate to the state Senate race after 4 years out of office, I had like a stunning record-breaking victory for placing, a high second for 6 seats. It was an incredible outcome to just demonstrate that opinion leaders mattered, endorsements mattered, lawn signs that said, we're doing this together, not just my name, but we wanted to have a message on them. If you give people something to hold on to, that's what they really want. It might be too much work to reach the people who say, I don't care anymore. People are hurting, and it's going to show up in different ways, but find the people who are hurting, who need someone to lift them back up, and go reach out to them and be that person who can help them participate again.
So what I'm hearing is the fundamentals are always the same. I mean, it's about being able to connect to the voter on messages and issues that really matter to them and giving them a sense of hope. So even though some of the infrastructure has changed and some of the tactics have changed, the essence, being an authentic leader and being able to connect with people and getting validators, that those things are the same.
They are, and it should make people feel more empowered. If they tell someone to go out and vote, that's what happened with Donald Trump, right? We never saw it, but they were telling each other. And so we have to remember, we in the South Asian community, we as women, we have strong trust circles, and we need to use those to really have tough conversations with people.
Thank you. That's a fantastic answer and a really eye-opening perspective on this. As we are all on this call as volunteers for Biden-Harris, keep this in mind as you're campaigning for these candidates. You are in a different moment, but it's about authenticity, it's about message, and you have a trust circle, as Kesha said, that you can really lean in on to motivate folks to vote for Biden-Harris. So we're running out of time, so I want to be a little bit more flexible. I have a question for you, Mayor, about vote by mail in New Jersey. You might have seen it pop up. And then I want to end with Harbir. So Mayor Jaffer, can you talk about, there's a question here about uncertainty, and I kind of think it applies to all of our races, but in the federal election as well, but about uncertainty in this pandemic moment and the importance of vote by mail. What are your thoughts about policies for voting in the Garden State in November 3rd? And I mean, also just frankly for this moment that we're in, how are you assuring your constituents that their votes are going to get counted?
Right. I mean, I think for us, the most important thing is to keep reiterating to people that our electoral system is secure. And that's what I try to get across to all my constituents, because it's actually the Trump administration and the far right media that's trying to scare everyone, because they want people to think that this election is not legitimate because they know they're going to lose miserably. Frankly, I think that that's what it is. And we cannot allow that narrative to gain prominence. So we don't have a voter fraud issue in this country. Our votes are very secure, and vote by mail is something that's done as the primary form of voting in many states. In New Jersey, the governor has declared that this will be a primarily vote by mail election. As was the primary this year, every registered voter will receive a vote by mail ballot, which can be returned either by mail, dropped in secure ballot drop boxes in your county, any ones of the drop boxes in your county, or you can turn in your ballot in person to the Board of Elections or at a polling place on election day. I personally will probably drop my ballot into one of the secure ballot boxes. And that is what I would recommend to people, you know, if they ask me which option should I choose. But any of the options are fine. But I would say return your ballot the day after you get it. Because that way you'll be guaranteed that it will reach where it needs to get. If there are any problems, that you will find out. There will be recourse to fix whatever the issue is. So I would say, you know, this is an opportunity to vote as early as you can, but feel secure, feel safe that this election is legitimate, and don't buy into the hype, because that is very unhealthy for our democracy. And I think more broadly, just relating to the question about COVID and about racism, I think it's so important for us not to let cynicism take over, because hopelessness empowers the worst people in our society. They want us to be hopeless. They want us to think that all elected officials are the same. They're all terrible. It's not true. We know that in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we have some really dedicated public servants who will lead our country with compassion and with the values that we all share. And that's something that I say when issues of racism come up. It does exist. It is systemic, and we need to address it. But having the right people in elected office means that you will get it addressed. You know, in our township, as I said, we have declared racism as a public health crisis, and we're thinking about it in those terms. And that's something that I think other elected officials or people from another party might not have done. So as much as our sadness and our anger about the injustices in our society motivate us, we cannot let them overtake us, because that's really what the worst people in our society want to happen. So that would be my parting message to everyone. Don't let cynicism take over. Be hopeful, and we can make a positive difference.
So I can see why you're mayor, and I can see how important. No, I mean, really, you're clear, you're confident, you're instilling confidence in democracy. It's wonderful. And thank you, Mayor. Harbir, I'm going to ask you to bring it all home. We're at 9 p.m., but we're going to go a little bit over because we have a little bit more to talk about, and then we're going to wrap up. I'm going to throw it back to Harini. So Harbir, there's been several questions about motivating our communities to vote, especially our first generation immigrants. And you talked about this in your story. So can you bring us home by talking about how you're approaching, dig a little deeper about your approach to get South Asian Americans excited about this election and engaged and involved as you have with these younger leaders in your community?
Sure. I think so. My tagline for my campaign is actually a brighter future. And the reason it was a very tough thing. Like, how do you come up with a tagline that just kind of encompasses all of you? But it was really about, as Sadaf has said, about the creating of the sense of hope. But it's also about education without burdening the society, feeling like you have to be educated to know these things. I think the pandemic has brought some very clear challenges to the forefront. And I will have to say Trump's election has also brought those challenges, that a lot of members of our community were forgotten. This is the reason why Trump won. And secondly, the lack of preparedness for a pandemic like COVID reminds us that how we're very much connected, because our economies allow us to exist, and for us to exist, we need to have an economy. It doesn't matter what color you are, right? So I think those are really inspirational, or if nothing else, should really motivate a person to realize you cannot you cannot be apathetic, you cannot be passive, you have to take engagement. And the way I've actually engaged my youth, and to be very frank about this, is that we're making decisions today that affect the lives of the people in the future. I will not be on this seat, and God, I will not want to sit on this seat longer than I need to if I win. I have no interest in just being chained to the seat forever. But if I have to create a platform where future leaders can continue to participate, I need to build that in today, okay? The decisions that were just made 4 years ago have brought me to the conditions and the challenges that I'm facing today as a city. So we are facing as a nation. We don't have enough revenue sources to deal with the pandemic. We don't have enough revenue sources that allowed us to, give some relief to our small businesses, to our low-income families, to rent. For example, the rent evictions that are, taking place in some cities and states are stopping them from happening. But if I had money in my bank, in my pocket as a city, I could help my citizens that way. See, that's where we realize how all these things are connected. It isn't just policy making for somebody else. It's policy making for my future and for my children's future. Or in my case, my nieces and nephews' future and my friends' youth future. So I would just remind everybody that you cannot be passive, because the decisions that are being made for the public, for the city, actually affect you. And if this pandemic hasn't, woken us up enough to remind us that we do not stand somehow protected from everybody else, from the impact, then, I don't know what else to say there is, but we need cities that can support us in pandemics. We need cities that think about the low income, the teachers, the youth, the seniors. If we don't have people that think about all these types of complexities, then we have decisions made that actually have long-term ramifications, and those ramifications are going to be impacted and in the lives of our youth that are going to be receiving the benefits and or the terrible consequences of those decisions. So please get up, shape that future.
I love it. Like, if you can't figure it out now, when will we figure it out, right? But to summarize, it's about connecting policy to the current conditions, and it's such a clear line to draw. So thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad, Kesha Ram, Dr. Jaffer, Mayor Dr. Jaffer. I'm going to give you all the titles. You're so awesome. Harbir Bhatia, what an honor. Thrilled. I'm going to kick it back over to Harini. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you leave inspired to do more. I know I sure am. Thanks, Harini, for having us.
Thank you. On behalf of South Asians for Biden, our National Director, Neha Divan, our team members, Azra, Ananya, Deepa, and Shivam, a huge thank you to Mini Timmaraju, our incredible moderator, and our amazing panel of speakers. Please accept our heartfelt gratitude for joining us today. To the attendees, thank you for joining us at this phenomenal event with these phenomenal sheroes who are, paving the way for change. And I hope you will join us as we organize the South Asian community over the next 65 days to get out the vote in what will be the most consequential election of our lifetime. And I hope each and every one of you will not only vote, but whether reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your friends and family, and get 5 people to vote. Yes. Please encourage them to join South Asians for Biden as South Asian community members. We have a voice. We have to use our voice in this election. Please encourage them to join phone banks, text banks, write postcards, join our events, write letters to the editor. And I'm going to leave you with these final words. We heard Vice President Joe Biden say these words at the Democratic National Convention. This is our moment. This is our mission, and let hope and history rhyme so that we can elect Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris as the next president and vice president of the United States. And for that, we need you. We're all in this together, and we need you to vote, to get out the vote. Thank you so much for joining us. And please visit us at www.southasiansforbiden.org. And again, a huge thank you to all our panelists and our moderator, and have a great night. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.